Hey, hello everyone and welcome to Extreme Graphics Tech. My name is Angelo and on today's video I'm going to be talking about a GPU that I have been wanting to have on my collection for so many years. It was like a unicorn at the beginning when it was launched that was only people with lots of money was able to buy, and I wasn't one of them. So I had to look and, wanting it to have it, selling it, but never being my own. But that has changed after 7 years. That is none other than the GTX 1080 Ti. I think this is the most legendary car Nvidia has ever made and their biggest mistake. And I call it mistake because we're going to be seeing on the benchmarks in a little bit, but I think this car represented a problem for Nvidia. I always wanted to have it, but when it would launch, it launched for $700. It was a lot of money. And at the time, it was even better to just spend on two 1070s, and you could use SLI at the time still, so it seemed like a better investment. However, we know how SLI has gone, and I have to say that after 7 years, this is probably one of the best GPU investments you could have ever made if you had the money at the time. And so nowadays, you can find them for a lot cheaper, obviously because it's used, been 7 years. But I always wanted to have on my collection because it's this probably and the 1030, the only two GPUs from the 10 series that I didn't have. And well, the 1080 Ti has always been legendary, but I've never been able to test one for myself. But that changes today because we are going to check the benchmarks right now, and then I'm going to come with my conclusion. Hey, but before that, I have to tell you something. Do you know that 80% of the people that are watching this video are not subscribed to it? And I'm not quite sure why, because I know that if you're watching this video, it's because you like it. So go and click the subscribe and like button. It's free. Do it now because you're going to forget. I know that you're going to forget. You say, yeah, I'll do it. And then you forget. So just do it now. And while I'm saying this, just do it. Okay, you done? Fine. Excellent. Thank you. Now let's go with the benchmarks. Okay, before I start with the test, I have to apologize because of the quality of the video. I changed some settings on OBS because I wanted to record in AV1 format and I forgot to change the bit rate of the recording. So this is what happens when you do that. You have to set everything all again. So having said that, even though the video is not very good quality, the benchmarks were not affected and the results are visible. So the first game I wanted to test with the GTX 1080 Ti is Forza Horizon 5. Even though it's an old game, I never played with this car on this one, and being this one of the most optimized game in the latest year, I have to say it looks phenomenal and it runs like a beauty. It's 1440p native at ultra quality and we are above 80 FPS, which is so good, and I will say much better than any console like the Xbox Series X. Even I think we could have gone even to 4K 30 FPS probably with ultra setting, which is quite good for a 7-year-old GPU. And of course, it wouldn't be a test from me if I don't test Dying Light 2. And as you can see here, this is a game that we are once again playing at 1440p FSR quality, high settings in the higher settings without ray tracing, and we are above 60 FPS. How good is that, guys? How good is to play a game like this, so new, so modern, so good looking, and still have those nice FPS with a 7-year-old GPU? That's just insane. Honestly, the value of this car and how good it has aged is probably one of the most legendary and better GPU from Nvidia. This is just magnificent. So, and one of the newest game I tested in this case is Ghost of Tsushima. And as you can see here, the game is running at 1440p with the high settings. I'm using XeSS balance, and just because I think it provides better visual quality, even though it's not seen in this video unfortunately. But I wanted to just be sure that we can use XeSS of FSR without issues. And yes, here we are playing at above 60 FPS. I think there were some areas or some moments where it dipped a little bit under 60. Don't remember exactly, but I think they are very rare. And as you can see, the frame time and frame rate is very stable, which is quite good for all things considered for what we're testing here. So very good for the 1080. Now, Hogwarts Legacy, I tested this at 1440p native with high settings. I probably should have tested with FSR quality or anything like that, just to have a little bit more of frame rate. But well, you can see what the GPU is capable of at this resolution and at these settings. Yeah, we are not at 60 unless when we go like into interiors, it will go up to 60, but when we are flying and in some areas it will be around 45 to 55 FPS, which I still think is very good, all considered by the fact that we're using native. Of course, if you play at 1080p, then it will be even better, so no issues there. Horizon Forbidden West. I had to, use medium settings because this game from medium to high, the change in performance is quite big and I couldn't see so much of a difference to justify that. So I prefer to use medium to keep above 60 FPS because I didn't want to use like FSR balance or performance just to get there to the 60 when using high. So in this case, I use these settings and the game is running just so good. 1440p FSR quality, it's another testament to how good the GTX 1080 Ti still is after 7 years. To play on these performance levels and quality, to me, is just really mind-boggling. However, not everything is perfect, and when we come to Starfield, this is one of those games that in exteriors you won't be able to get to 60 FPS, not even using 1080p or FSR at 50% medium settings, because the game will just not do. It will go to around 40 to 50, but it will never hit 60 unless you go into a cave or an interior or anything like that. But however, remember, this game has frame generation, and that is one of those things that you can, activate. And the reason I'm showing that, I tested it and it worked, and it was getting double the frame rate, but the reason I'm showing is because I think I have to show you the full performance of the car in this case, not using, that sort of trickery in that sense. Now here on Alan Wake 2, I was expecting, a decent performance, but I wasn't expecting this good, to be honest, because you know how this game is heavy. I know they released a patch improving on GTX car, but still, I wasn't expecting it to be this good. In this case, we are playing a 1440p FSR balance, low setting, and we're having very good performance. I think this is one of those games that you can limit to like 40 or 30 FPS depending on your monitor, and then up the quality to maybe medium settings or maybe FSR quality and have even a better image. I think this game, is one of those that you can play at 30 FPS, no issues. So that's an option. The Last of Us Part 1 is another game that I think you can lock at 30 if you want, or at 40 if that's possible for your monitor. But even here, we're using FSR quality, high settings, and the game is running close to 60. We could have gone to FSR balance, but I didn't want to push it too much. Or if you play at 1080p, you are not going to have this issue, but you can see the frame time and frame rate is very stable. Another thing you can do in this game, because the VRAM will allow you to, is to put the game on high settings with high textures. I don't mean to go to ultra on everything, because then the game will tank performance unless you're willing to limit to 30 FPS, in which case you shouldn't have any issues moving ultra. Hellblade 2 is a game that, is one of the latest and most visually stunning games made with Unreal 5. So to get to those 60 FPS, you will have to really sacrifice something, like either by resolution, by using an aggressive FSR, or by settings the settings lower than medium, because on this configuration you don't get quite there. So you're going to be playing at around 55 to 60 FPS, even a little bit lower at points. So that's something you have to take in mind when setting the configuration for some of these games, depending on what you are trying to achieve exactly. However, as I was mentioning before, if you lock the game to like 30 FPS, then you can keep 1440p and go to TSR 100%. So in that way you have a much clearer image. Unfortunately, I recorded this in a very bad quality, so I can show you, but the difference between FSR and native in this game is quite important. Even though FSR still looks good, it's a little bit soft, the image, and you won't see all the details, where here is crystal and completely sharp. So that's, I think, is a quite important distinction for this game. As you can see, there are some dips to 28, 27, but I still think it's more than playable because of the nature of the game. Cyberpunk is another game that, wow, it really surprised me. I was expecting a worse performance. Of course, we cannot use ray tracing. Well, we can, but you know what happened. So at this point, I set with the high settings using FSR balance, and we're going above 70 FPS. This is another game that has frame generation, but only for DLSS. So well, we cannot activate that here. But anyway, there are some mods that you can use, and just if you want to, then you maybe can go to 4K with DLSS and still have above 60 FPS while using maybe medium settings. So anyway, the GTX 1080 is proving to be a complete beast of a card. And now this is Avatar. This is one of the most stunning, beautiful games that you can find on the market, even if you don't like Ubisoft or the genre. And yeah, here things are a little bit difficult. We had to go to 1080p FSR quality, which, you know, I wouldn't go lower than that for 1080p, but even though this has a good implementation, maybe going FSR balance will have gotten to the 60 FPS. But as I said, if you limit this game to around 40 to 50 FPS with the GTX 1080 Ti, you are going to have a very good experience. So once again, this card is proving to be really, really better than I anticipated. Well, I'm using the performance for this card. I think is still really, really good. Most of the games we were able to play at 1440p, close or above 60 FPS. And so if you are playing at 1080p, this is great. The performance is around the same as a 2070 Super or an RX 6600 XT, with the advantage of having 3 extra gigs of VRAM, which we know is going to help a lot. So, and one of the reasons I call this card the biggest mistake Nvidia did is because it was so good when it was released. And you know, at the time it seemed like a lot of money, but if you think about it, somebody who bought it and is still using it, it only like paid $100 a year for this GPU. And so that's why I call it a mistake, because I'm sure that many who bought this are still rocking one and still not wanting to change the GPU. Maybe when the RTX 5000 series come, but we're talking they jump 2, 3, and 4. So 3 generations of GPUs, and it doesn't even mean that everybody's going to jump from this one. And the best part is, you know, you can get this GPU for around $100 to $150 to $170. So when you think about it, if you are able to sell a car after 7 years for that amount of money, you are still recovering much more than I would have thought from $700 that you pay initially. So at the end of the day, the car only costs you like $550, and then that money you're going to sell at this, you're going to put it for a new one. So it's amazing to think how things have advanced in terms of price, because $700 that look like a lot was immediately destroyed by the 2080 Ti that cost $1,200. And after that, well, we know where we are now with GPUs costing $1,600 and $700, giving you the mid-range GPUs essentially. Oh boy, the GTX 1080. I'm so glad to have the GTX 1080 Ti on my GPU collection, and on my be able to test it now, because now this is a card that I'm going to put on my yearly rotation to bring you updates on it, because I want to see how long will this card be able to play at a decent level. It's amazing to me that after 7 years, this GPU is still rocking and working so good, because as I said, I play most of the games at 1440p. But if you are going to go 1080p, of course you're going to get much better performance. But even on those games that we were not able to properly get, or that we're not able to get 60 FPS because, well, you know, it's 7 years old, we now have things like FSR frame generation, which we can use to improve the performance and get to those, you know, above 60 FPS, even though, you know, it's not the same as real frames, but it's still much better than just playing at 40 to 45 FPS. So I don't know, but this car seems that it's going to last for a little bit while still, so that's amazing to see and say. So I hope you like this video, and I'm so glad to have the GTX 1080 Ti on my you know, yearly review. So I hope you subscribe for next year's 2024. Is it the 1080 Ti still good in 2025? Thank you, and see you on the next video.